Hello and welcome. You are watching Business Plus here on News 9 Live. I'm Krishna Kumar and joining me in the studio is my colleague and friend Karthik Malhotra. Karthik, great to have you in the show. We're going to begin, as always, the afternoon edition of Business Plus with a roundup of India's stock markets, which have closed up in the green for the day. Karthik, Sensex up over 400 points, Nifty at that 19,550 levels.
Absolutely, Krishna. I think good day for the markets. Nothing to really complain about. Markets opened well. They had a strong run through the day. Nifty and Sensex both closed off the day's high. Nifty holding well above the 19,500 level, just a tad short of 19,550. Sensex, on the other hand, has had a good bull run today, a good 400-point surge, ending the day with about 16,600. We haven't seen the same momentum, unfortunately, in the small cap stocks, in today's trading day. And this has been a fairly volatile segment of stocks. We've seen, massive correction happening in small caps. Now, I think the day's trade was largely set in the morning when US closed well last evening, our time, and that sort of had an impact on the Indian markets, on the Asian pack per se.
And of course, Asian markets also closing with modest gains, also helping the close of Indian markets.
And I think a massive gain today in the banking stocks, Bank Nifty up, substantially. So overall, I think a good day to be in the markets and nothing really to complain about.
Nothing really to complain about. IT stocks and financials doing well in trade for the day, Karthik?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think financials definitely. IT stocks have also been all right. Nifty IT not as high as the Nifty Bank Index, but Nifty IT also holding on to its levels. And overall, we've seen a decent day for markets. And the news really that markets would be awaiting is 10 a.m. tomorrow, when RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das starts the announcement on the MPC decision on rates. I believe the markets would have taken in, whatever they seem would come out of the MPC, and most analysts, most economists feel that a pause is going to continue. But we've also had some voices coming in fact, on our show itself yesterday, suggesting that there could be a rate cut as well. That view not echoed yet by anybody else, but let's see. It's definitely not going to be another hike from what it seems, because inflation numbers have come down. But would the pause button continue to be pressed, or are we going to go backwards onto a rate cut is something we'll get to know tomorrow morning.
All right, and there you go, gainers and losers. The big gainers, Nifty Bank Index, Nifty IT and Nifty Auto, IT and financials, top gainers in trade today. Nifty Media stocks, Karthik, incidentally, up over 1.5% as well in trade today. We're talking about voices and talking about what is going to happen forward. Are we looking at a rate cut? Are we looking at a hold? Let's get a fresh market voice in. Joining us live on the show, Mr. Aamar Deo Singh, Head Advisory of Angel One Private Limited, joining us. Mr. Aamar Deo Singh, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here on Business Plus this afternoon. Talk to us. Sensex up 400 points. Markets also reacting to news on crude set to come off its highs as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say that markets were looking for a pullback, and what we were seeing is that some of the heavyweights in terms of Reliance, HDFC, we've seen some sort of selling pressure there. But again, they were approaching very crucial support zones. And as you rightly said, that crude oil prices seem to be cooling off. So that's one definitely a thumbs up for the markets if it remains that way. And also technically anywhere between 19,200, 19,300, that was a very strong support zone for Nifty. So close to 19,300, we saw Nifty pullback, and today was a I would say very positive day in that regard. And also, if you look at the overall breadth of the market, we see advances in 2:1 in favor of the declines. But the key point here is that what we are seeing technically on the charts is that there could be some consolidation. Also, we have the MPC. Their report and the view coming out tomorrow as far as the interest rates are concerned.
And what is your view before you move any further? A hold or a cut? What are you expecting?
A cut seems very unlikely. So it could be a status quo, but what is going to be more important is that what's the forward-looking statements, or what are the statements which the RBI is going to come out with as to how it's going to, because this is going to be a tough time for any central bank, because inflationary concerns are definitely there. So we'll have to wait and watch. and markets have been anticipating on similar lines. So, having said that, I would say that technically, be it Nifty, be it Bank Nifty, we are seeing some sort of consolidation and some sort of a pullback from the levels, but
Okay.
shouldn't read too much
Is that
into it.
consolidation also applicable to small cap stocks? Karthik here was talking to us about how huge correction in small cap stocks in today's trading session. Amar, I was asking that with you. We were talking about how small cap stocks have seen a correction in today's trading session. We've seen a huge run up in small cap and mid caps, even when the broader markets weren't performing all that well. So, are we in consolidation mode as far as small cap and mid cap stocks as well?
I would say looking at the small cap index, the 250 clearly shows that upside seems to be capped at the moment, because some of the technical indicators are clearly showing that a double top formation is there on the cards, and higher levels will be sold into, because if you look at across the small cap or the mid cap, we've got multi-baggers, we've got phenomenal, spectacular returns in many of the stocks. So profit booking, and also there's some concern with regard to the strengthening in the US dollar. The rupee, however, has maintained I would say a fairly strength, maintained a fair degree of strength, not reaching the 84 mark. But if you look at the dollar index, that's breached 106 level. So that clearly shows that there are concerns with regard to the overall global economy, not much in particular with regard to Indian economy, but global economy. So that's having some rub-off effect across different segments. And as far as small cap, mid cap is concerned, we could witness some profit booking around these levels, or at the most consolidation.
Okay.
So strengthening of the dollar, Amar, is that going to now translate into money moving back into the US markets and perhaps at the cost of Asian markets, including India?
See, what happens is that as long as there are serious concerns with regard to the global risk factors, which are playing into the market. So from that perspective, dollar has been gaining significantly. So if I look at the dollar index earlier was unable to breach the 105, 106 level. So now it's trading above that level. So that clearly tells me that there is this move towards less riskier asset classes. And also, if you look at global markets, they've given some very good returns. So there's also a profit booking that's happening. And also, I would say that if we continue seeing dollar index moving higher, and if you look at in correlation with gold prices have also witnessed a significant correction. So that clearly tells me that there is some means reduction in the risk appetite of investor community at large across different asset classes, and that's being reflected in the dollar index gaining strength.
Okay, and talk to us about where you see crude headed from here, because we've seen crude prices also being fairly volatile. I think just a few days ago we were talking about crude likely to touch $100 levels.
Absolutely.
And today we are seeing a massive correction in crude as well, trading below $85 a barrel. So where is crude headed from here, and what is making it so volatile, apart from what we know, the production cuts which are expected to become even deeper? But is there anything else which is moving crude right now?
Because the way it looks, we need a separate crude volatility index. Like we have a volatility index for the Indian stock markets.
Yeah, well, rightly said, because crude oil prices, if you look at the Brent crude, it had rallied towards almost 90, 97, 98 levels, and currently it's around 85, and the correction has been quite steep. So more or less with regard to, I would say, global concerns, and also with regard to cooling prices, because earlier there were concerns with regard to supply side being in a tighter position. So it's more of, I would say, some of those concerns are tapering off, and also what we are seeing is that there could be some signs of profit booking also happening in this crude oil market, because the way crude oil prices have rallied from almost 75 to 95, and that also within a very short span of time since the start of July, and in the first week of October, we've seen a significant rally. So it's more or less some sort of correction. Technically, if you ask me, it shows that there could be consolidation. Upside seems to be capped at the moment. 90, 95, $100 would be a crucial zone of resistance. On the downside, yes, if I look at Brent crude, somewhere around 80, 82 is a very strong support zone. There is a possibility that we could see a pullback from those levels.
Okay, and let's talk specifically on stocks that were in action today. And if you look at the top gainers, let's start with the gainers. I think it's always good
I
to
was
start
about
with
to
the
ask
gainers.
something. The big gainer for the day, you're talking about the top gaining stocks.
Absolutely.
Right. The Bajaj Auto, L&T, M&M, Titan and TCS, Karthik.
Absolutely. So L&T, I think a robust order book is definitely something which has kept the stock really in the green today. M&M on the back of good auto numbers, but those numbers came 2 days back. So I'm just wondering, what is driving M&M and Bajaj Auto today? Amar, do you have a view on these?
Yeah, so if I look at M&M, we're seeing that the stock has bounced back, and there is some I would say some temporary respite, because earlier Mahindra and Mahindra, we saw the stock witnessing some correction, and then there is a pullback, but it's more or less consolidation that is happening there. Talking about the other stock which you mentioned, Bajaj Auto. So Bajaj Auto, we've seen I would say the stock is still trading at record highs, almost close to record highs. And if I look at from a short-term perspective, 4,800, 5,000, that's a zone of support for the stock. On the upside, resistance is around 5,200 levels. And if you look at the data also, which is coming out with regard to the auto sector, that has been extremely strong and positive. And also going forward with the festival season, expectations are that this trend would continue.
Okay.
So I think these factors are definitely playing out a positive.
Any long-term view on both Bajaj Auto and Mahindra, given this entire shift which is happening towards electric mobility?
Right.
We haven't really seen too many announcements coming after the XUV 400, the only electric vehicle from the Mahindra stable, and very little news coming in from Bajaj on its EV plans. So long-term, how do you see these two players really holding up?
I would say long term, if you ask me, Bajaj Auto is definitely on any significant correction. One should look at a buying opportunity in Bajaj Auto, because they are also looking at diversifying their portfolio, and definitely EV is the way forward, because currently if you look at the percentages and 5 years down the line, the percentages are going to be multifold. So in terms of the EV penetration. So those companies or those automobile companies who would be able to capitalize on that, they stand a better chance and a better opportunity, and Bajaj definitely could be a winner there.
Right. I wanted to check on the other big gainers as well. Some famous stocks like Titan, like TCS, like L&T. When we talk about blue chips and Mr. Junjunwala's favorite stock as well. So talk to us, what is exactly moving these classic stocks up in trade today?
Yeah, so looking at first Titan. So Titan again has been, I would say, a significant wealth creator. It is witnessing some sort of consolidation currently, because it did make a high a few days back, all-time high, I would say, somewhere around 3352, and currently it's around 3200 odd levels. So that's a minor correction. But if you ask me from a long-term perspective, see what happens is that Titan is very much into a branded segment, and they've got different lines of their products in terms of jewelry and other products. So the demand for that would only increase going forward. Yeah, there would be some, I would say, setbacks if economy doesn't perform, or there's some hit on the global economy or the Indian economy. But overall, if you ask me, it's all a mindset change which India is witnessing, and that's likely to grow further with regard to brands like Titan and other, I would say, brands which are of repute.
Looking at the board. Yeah, go ahead, please, Amar.
Yeah, and also Titan is also because gold is also a very important part and raw material in there. So gold prices would also be very closely looked at by Titan, and how they hedge their gold is also of importance.
Fair enough. Gold prices have been under pressure recently as well. It's probably playing into the rise up in Titan stock. Karthik, but at the end of the day, IT stocks did well in trade today, and clearly one of the top gainers was TCS.
Absolutely. So TCS also up. I think you look at that board of top gainers, it is almost like soul food. It's a low action day. Macros are good, fundamentals are good, not too many news triggers. What do I buy? Hey, let's go and buy these 5 stocks. This is soul food. This will always hold me well.
Yeah, there's no chance of going wrong with those 5 5 stocks on the board. I just want to stick with the gainers before we go into losers. Mr. Aamar Deo Singh, we saw the media pack gain over 1.5%. In fact, that's the pack that gained the most for the day.
On a day that World Cup actually starts, and there
Exactly.
is a 2,000 crore rupee ad revenue up for grabs.
Yes, yes.
Is that driving it? I don't know what's
Exactly.
driving it.
Is it Cricket World Cup that's driving the rise in the media pack?
Yeah, I would say if I look at the media stocks somewhere or the other, we definitely that's going to be one of the factors which is playing on these markets, and also we are seeing some sort of positive trend going forward also. But at the same time, I would suggest that one should look at booking profits also, because most of these are trading at significant resistance levels. So from that perspective, one can look at a profit booking opportunity in the media pack.
Oh, okay, so different kind of an opportunity with the World Cup for media stocks. Karthik, it's time then to shift focus away from all the gainers to all the losers in trade today.
Absolutely. Let's move to the losers. I think we've seen Power Grid, NTPC do government-led enterprises down in the red. Top losers today. We've also got Hindalco, Cipla and Nestle India surprisingly being among the most, biggest losers of the day. So Nestle India, what is your view, Amar? What is pulling down Nestle today?
Which stock you mentioned?
Nestle India.
Yeah, so if I look at Nestle India is more or less witnessing some sort of consolidation, because it witnessed a significant rally, and currently we are seeing some sort of profit booking happening in the stock, because yesterday was a day of extremely heavy volumes compared to the average volume. So that clearly tells me that a lot of selling has happened yesterday, and that is close to the zone of, if I look at the resistance zone, so that's around 23,300, 350 zone. Currently it's around 22,900 or so. So it effectively means that more profit booking is happening in the stock, and one should look at, if one is long on the stock, one can look at booking profits in this particular counter.
All right, and talk to us about NTPC Power Grid. Power generation seems to be in trouble this in today's trade.
Yeah, see, NTPC was clearly displaying that the bullish momentum with the stock. See, the stock had a dream run, because earlier the stock was, if I go back in time, so the stock was unable to breach the 150, 180 levels. So as recent as I would say June first week, the stock then started rallying above 180. Currently it's around 233 odd levels. So the long term, if you ask me, the long term trend remains extremely strong and positive for NTPC, no doubt. Short term, we are seeing some sort of consolidation, some sort of profit booking. And so on the downside, if you ask me, somewhere around 220 would be a level. 215, 220 is a zone of support for NTPC. And technically and otherwise also, the stock was looking for some sort of correction in terms of profit booking.
Right.
And the
just one last thing we want to check with you, and that is on the pharma pack. You saw Cipla emerging as one of the top losers in trade today, and the pharma pack too was down in the red for the day. It's a pack that's done so well. Pharma stocks have done so well over the last 6 months or so. What exactly happened in the day's trading session?
Yeah, I would say that if you look at Cipla, you rightly said that Cipla and most of the pharma stocks had a really good last few months, and Cipla from 900 to almost 1300 level, currently around 1160. So it is clearly in I would say more or less a consolidation zone as far as Cipla is concerned. On the downside, 1100, that's a level of support. Again, on the upside, 1300, the recent high that it has made. So what it effectively means is that the top that Cipla has made, that's not likely to be breached in the near term. So it could be more of consolidation happening in the stock. But yes, a very good buying opportunity would be around the 1100 levels.
Right, Aamar Deo of Angel One there, joining us with the wrap-up of the day's trading session. Help us understand what exactly went on in India's stock markets. Aamar, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here this afternoon on Business Plus, and hope to keep having you on the show again and again. With that, we wrap up what the day's markets were, the trading session was. It's time now to take things away from the markets to other more important issues that were dominating mind space today. And one of them clearly is something that's associated very closely with all of us, and that is flying and taking flights. There are new rules now for aircraft carriers filing for insolvency. In fact, the rules have been tweaked. The section 14, so to speak, which makes sure that once an aircraft carrier starts insolvency proceedings, all assets of that carrier will be put under moratorium. That's India's bankruptcy code, or IBC. But now, aviation companies, aircraft carriers are now said to be exempt from that ruling. What that essentially means is that companies that are leasing aircraft to Indian carriers can now be more confident of leasing out aircraft to these companies. No matter what happens to these companies, if they go into insolvency or not, they can get their aircraft back. That's what it means. But then again, this could also mean something positive for Indian companies that are sending out huge orders to lease aircraft from some of the biggest aircraft lessors across the world. So let's understand all of this better. What does this mean? Is it a complete change of rules being made, an exception being made just for the aviation sector, just because of the kind of troubles that the aviation sector has been going through since the pandemic and after? Or is it a status quo? Let's understand this better, and let's understand how this impacts us and our ability to take affordable flights at the right time and make sure we land on the right time as well. And to do that, we have a very special guest joining us on the broadcast, Mr. Bharat S. Kumar, Associate Partner, Sai Krishnan Associates. Bharat, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. Just stay with us.
Pleasure.
Let's quickly put the basics into perspective. Karthik, before we go to Bharat, let's talk about these new rules. We know what the companies, aircraft companies, airline companies in India have been going through. Classic example is what's happening with GoFirst. What does this mean? Also, I'm given to understand that this can even apply with retrospective effect. So talk to us. What exactly has happened over here?
That's in fact the big if, and that is exactly what the statement also released, suggests that if these rules were to be applicable retrospectively, then the lessors of GoFirst could also take their aircraft back. But we don't know whether that big if is going to go through or not. So what this typically means is that we've seen that NCLT, after GoFirst filed for voluntary insolvency and the case got admitted in LCLT, NCLT had put a moratorium on the lessors to take their aircraft back, and any dues that GoFirst had pending on its books to the lessors, to anybody else that it owed money, that was all put under moratorium. Now, what that really did was, Krishna, it created some sort of a fear of the Indian legal system and the proceedings of the IBC and the NCLT and NCLAT in the minds of the lessors. Now, the lessors wanted to renegotiate their terms, and they became fairly wary of supplying their aircraft or leasing their aircraft to Indian carriers. Now, when that came through, Indian carriers obviously started, feeling the jitters that will they have to pay more for leasing those aircraft from the lessors, and in case lessors decided not to supply aircraft to them, then even those very few profit-making airlines existing in India, those that are not bankrupt, how are they going to function? How are they going to survive? And that pretty much, became the bone of contention between aircraft carriers, airlines operating out of India, and lessors, who are global organizations who lease aircraft to carriers around the world. Now, there was something called a Cape Town Convention, and the Cape Town Convention, popularly known as CTC, suggested that in the event of any sort of bankruptcy proceedings, insolvency proceedings, lessors would have the right to their aircraft. But NCLT said that in an event like that, our IBC is going to take precedence over CTC. And it looks like now that is likely to get reversed. Now, will it get reversed retrospectively or henceforth is something I think we need to understand.
Right, that is something that's very important as well, because if it does apply with retrospective effect, then the fortunes of GoFirst change drastically. Bharat, talk to us. We'll begin with this first, grey area. From what has come out, do you think that this applies with retrospective effect? And if it does, what does it mean for GoFirst?
Okay, first of all, the whole situation, in fact, has been very correctly put forward by Karthik. And how the situation pans now at this moment is that there is a Cape Town Conventional Bill. In fact, I'm so sorry, a Cape Town Convention is what was signed by India in 2008. This bill came into play in 2001. And by being a signatory to this convention, India was to make certain, particularly when it comes to aviation, that aircraft lessors any aircraft at that point of time can be reclaimed back by the lessors. And in such a situation, even if there be an insolvency, aircraft lessors would not suffer owing to there being an insolvency proceeding or any other proceeding going on. Coming back to how this notification affects us is that to give you a brief, what happens is that a Section 14 moratorium, or probably a time period, a period wherein the authority, adjudicating authority, the NCLT, gives a party, gives the corporate debtor, that is, if probably a SpiceJet, I'm just giving an example, SpiceJet or a GoAir or any other airline, whether it files insolvency proceedings voluntarily or a creditor files it, an operational creditor or a financial creditor. In such a situation, what happens is there is a freeze which happens. By a freeze, what I mean is Section 14 very categorically says that if there be any legal proceeding which is going against that entity, against that airline, that will be frozen. Any assets which are in question, which are particularly a bone of contention, would be frozen. So long and short of it, it makes certain that practically everything freezes at that point of time, so that it becomes easier for them to adjudicate the whole issue. Now, pursuant to this notification, in fact, the Cape Town Convention, as I had earlier mentioned, what happens is that India has now, there's been, you can say, a ratification of that convention to some extent. India had even in fact, earlier this year, Cape Town Convention bill was to be introduced in the parliament. That couldn't happen for whatever reasons. But this notification which now comes through, as Karthik had correctly mentioned, it doesn't particularly state as to whether this is retrospective in nature or rather whether it's prospective in nature, but gives all the airline lessors a sign of relief. And why it gives a sign of relief is, so hypothetically speaking, if an airline leasing company leases, for example, 50 aircrafts to another company, an airline company, and that company probably defaults on the leases and the amounts to be paid. In such a situation, irrespective of whether something is filed in the NCLT or not, the airline lessors have an option of taking the aircrafts back, and the amounts which are due can subsequently be taken back by them through legal channels. Now, Section 14 very categorically says that there won't be any proceedings which will be stayed. This also gives a two-way dimension to it. One being that if there are proceedings pending in the NCLT, and in such a situation, they take it back, that they continue to be properly an operational creditor. Secondly, if that not be the case and they initiate it early, so they can also look into other proceedings because now there's no stay on. So from an international perspective, this gives a lot of confidence to an airline creditor and any entity which is leasing airlines, because at least they are certain that they can take their airlines back.
Okay, well, essentially, then what it means, I would presume, is that companies are looking to expand and lease more aircraft at this stage. You're looking at a revamped Air India. You're looking at other companies which have gone, Indigo, for example, placing out huge orders. So it is good for these carriers in India, Karthik, which are already doing well and looking to expand further.
I think so, Krishna, simply because if lessors did not sort of, get their way through, like they seem to have got their way through now in the Section 14(1) clause being implemented, being notified, there was this fear that aircraft lessors would not be willing to lease aircraft to financially healthy airlines, like the ones you mentioned, Indigo and the Air India Vistara group. So I think it is obviously, as lessors begin to rejoice, it is also good news for existing airlines, financially healthy airlines, that there isn't going to be another renegotiation, there isn't going to be another bargaining of what rate, what cost are you going to lease your aircraft to me at, and all of that pretty much remains as it was before the Go First saga really rolled out.
All right, Bharat, my only contention at this point is that it seems as if what it would essentially mean if you allow the Cape Town Convention or the CTC to supersede the IBC or the Indian Bankruptcy Code, it means that India is making an exception for one sector. Just for the aviation sector, this particular Section 14 of IBC does not apply.
See, I'll tell you what. So aviation is a very capital intensive sector. If entities are to make such huge and humongous monetary commitments, they are to give you aircrafts on leases, then in such a situation, like other countries, because it's not that India is the only country, Cape Town Convention makes certain that signatories follow that. Lessors are allowed to take their aircrafts back. So I won't say that this is a shake-up. I would only say that this helps in building confidence, and how it will help further is that, like how Karthik also correctly mentioned, I'll add a few points to that. There are also concerns raised by an international aviation watchdog, and they said that in such a situation it could be future leases could be on higher terms, because our country, you don't want a situation where our country is seen as an unsafe country for any capital intensive sector like aviation. So in such a situation, it makes certain that we are at par with every other country who are also following such laws. An exception to this extent, coming back to what you said, is undoubtedly could be there, but it's not that it's not there in other countries, it's there. Even in the US, it's there. So it's completely fine.
Okay, Bharat, I just wanted to ask you one more question. How does this whole leasing business really work? Because do you get the whole aircraft with the engine, with the upholstery, with all the avionics, everything built in as one single unit? Or do you have the airframe coming from one lessor, you have the engines coming from another lessor, and hence, even with this Section 14 clause now being amended, you could be in a situation that, the engine maker or the engine lessor wants to take the engine back, but the mainframe or the body of the aircraft is there with you. And that doesn't do good to anybody, does it?
That's very nicely put, and that's very correct also. But usually in such situations, what happens is when if you're talking about the very recent situation, then what particularly happens is that lessors do line up and when they file petitions in the NCLT, it's seen as an attempt. Like for example, in the GoFirst case, there were initially a few claims made with respect to few engines. Then a few more lessors are also filed, and this subsequently adds up. So sum and substance of it is what you're saying is right, but how we see it is it's still better than maybe an aircraft being grounded or not being put to use, because what happens is in such a situation, whosoever has given those, for example, if it be a Pratt and Whitney engine, so the aircraft lessors may end up incurring heavy losses. So in such a situation, it's always better that the entity which is giving it obviously takes it back and then uses it for better use.
Okay, and once the insolvency proceedings end, sorry, last question to you, Bharat. Once the insolvency proceedings end, they sort of, once the case is closed, in a overall sort of, long-term scenario, who is better off? Is the lessor better off that even though there was a brief period of moratorium, thereafter, once the airline is presumably out of the bankruptcy proceedings, then the payment is made to the lessor retrospectively, I'm assuming, as opposed to, taking the aircraft back, finding somebody else to lease them to, and then sort of, letting go of whatever period of inaction while the aircraft was not in use. So overall, long term, don't you think they will both reach some sort of an equilibrium, and neither of the situations would actually be beneficial for the lessor?
Unfortunately, I would just disagree to some extent on this, and I'll tell you why. Because if a lessor takes the aircraft or probably the engine back, if there are deals for the engines that they take it back, and so on and so forth, what happens is they can, like I had mentioned, they can put it to better use. In such a situation, for the lessor, what remains is only and only taking the amount back, the dues, unpaid dues which are to be taken. In the present scenario, not only are all the aircrafts grounded because you can't touch them, but you also have your monetary dues. So I would say there's a double impact which comes on the lessor, which would not be in this case, because at least they can make use of the aircrafts at present, the engines or whatever parts they've given at present, and then they can recover this, because that would in either case take time. That will be according to how the whole structure works. But at this point of time, the aircrafts can be put to better use. That's how I see it. So I would say it's a good step. It's a positive step. Gives a lot of confidence to the industry.
Good step, positive step, a lot of confidence to an industry. An industry that's been through some of the worst times recently, emerging out of it, trying to find that solid ground. India's aviation sector is what I'm talking about. But for now, we wrap up this particular discussion. Thank you, Bharat S. Kumar, Associate Partner of Sai Krishna and Associates, for taking time out to be with us here and helping us understand what these new tweaked rules mean. And hope to keep having you on the show again and again. And we're going to take things away from the aviation industry into an industry that India just absolutely loves. It's